I always think that worrying is becoming acutely aware of everything you lack control over. And that part of stopping worrying isn't gaining control over all these things. Isn't worrying so you come up with answers to gain control. It is literally accepting and becoming comfortable that you do lack that control.
Exactly.
Right?
No, exactly.
And knowing that the happiness is built to end. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the lie of worrying. That it's going to solve it. Do you know what I mean? But it never does. Not the big thing. I mean, because there's always something more. So, you know what I mean? That's the falseness. It has a sense that it's going to cure something, but it never can.
Hello and welcome to The Wrong Conversation. I am David Peters. I am here as always with my dear friend and co-host, Adrien Fiorucci. And today we're going to actually be responding to a comment that was left on one of our other videos.
And it was a direct question, or it was a direct request to do an episode. It wasn't just a comment. It was kind of like, hey, would you do an episode about this? And it was something like, why is it that even a simple moment of joy can turn to worry? Or, when I'm feeling happy, and all of a sudden it can just turn into worry. I think she wanted us to comment on why that might be.
So just to set a little context for how we're going to be talking about worry today, the show is called The Wrong Conversation. And so we called the show The Wrong Conversation because people are often stuck because they're stuck in the wrong conversation. And if you just change the conversation, sometimes an answer or a solution will just naturally emerge from a different conversation.
I'm in. Sounds like a good idea.
All right.
Yeah. The first thing, I did want to say this, because as soon as I read that comment, immediately my mind, because I felt like I knew exactly what she was talking about, just because I had heard Brene Brown talk about exactly this thing, that she calls it foreboding joy. And one of the stories she told to try to contextualize it was, like, imagine a family is riding in a car. You're watching a movie and a family's riding in a car and it's Christmas Eve and the snowflakes are falling down on the windshield and you can hear them, singing Christmas carols in the car and the camera starts to zoom out. And what's the next scene? Right? And immediately you're like, a car crash or, something terrible. Something terrible is gonna, they do that in a movie like that because they know that, you're already kind of built to turn that moment of joy into something to worry about. And I think it's more common than most of us would realize, You'll experience it all over the place. Lots of superstitions are built on that, right? You say something and you're like, it's something you want. Oh, don't jinx it, knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
What is that? That's like hands-on foreboding joy, right? You don't even dare to say what you want because you might jinx it. It's like, I think that's a really common thing to experience. I think that's the first thing that might help turn the conversation a little bit. Because probably it feels like a weird thing to feel. Right?
Well, you might, the wrong conversation might be thinking that it's you, that this is only you who does this, or that you have a particular problem. But it's
like you're screwed up for doing this, right?
Yeah, but because it's not just common, it's universal, right? It's like that's one of the first things I think about worrying is that we are built to be worrying machines.
Yeah. Well, the mind, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a problem solver, so it's always... right?
It's a problem solver, and that's kind of what worrying is trying to do, right? You're imagining all of these potential things that might happen and trying to solve for them ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right? So that if it happens, you're ready.
Right, exactly. That's the pretense, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't always work very well.
It very rarely works. Yes, yeah.
I think that's a great place to start with shifting the conversation, is just to say, well, it's not just you.
Right.
It's all of us.
Right.
To varying degrees.
Like you said, we're built to do it. It's not a malfunction.
We're built to do it.
Right.
Yeah, it's natural. It's natural, and it has it's a program, right? Worrying is like a program, and it's a program with a purpose.
Right.
Right? The purpose is to help solve problems ahead of time. A human being, what makes people so unique from other animals, at least as far as my understanding goes, is that we have the ability to abstract thought and project our imaginations into the future and all these kind of things.
That's why we're such great
You know,
manifestors, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but part of what comes with that is worrying. Right? What could happen? What could happen? And this is all the maybe. This is all the uncertainty. But the next thing I think to realize is that the well of uncertainty is endless.
Yeah.
It's endlessly deep. Right?
Yeah. That's why I said pretense too, right? Because there's some feeling that if you worry about it enough, you'll solve it. But then there's the issue you just brought up. Maybe you'll solve that one, but then there's another one and another one. Yeah.
I often think of worry as kind of being like quicksand. You know, it's like the more you move, the deeper you sink. You know, the more time you struggle there, the more it pulls you in.
I agree. That's great. That's a beautiful metaphor because that's exactly even how it feels. You're even aware. I remember one time we talked about this, and I think, and you had said, the worst advice you could tell somebody, a worrier, is don't worry or stop worrying, right? Right? Because then you're just, I should stop worrying. Then you're worrying about the fact that you worry so much, right? That's an example of the struggling in the quicksand and just feeling yourself sink in deeper. You know, it's not working. This isn't working, you know.
Well, you can get lost there. I mean, worrying is a type of focus. Like we talk about focus a lot, and how important your focus is, because whatever you're looking at, like that's what you see, right? So if you're looking at something you're worried about, if you're looking for something that's out of your control, if you're looking for somewhere that's uncertain or that's unknown or that you don't understand or that you have a weak hand in, right? Like where you have a weakness in, then that's what you're aware of. And then suddenly, like, it's almost like having on a pair of glasses, right? Like a red pair of sunglasses.
Yeah.
And everything you see turns red.
Right.
Right? It kind of becomes your whole environment. And if that's all you're seeing, suddenly everything kind of gets painted with that brush.
Oh, yeah.
And then you start to focus on everything you're out of control over. And that sense of being out of control, if everything you see you feel out of control of, it drags you down real quick.
And it's a hard game to play. You know, one that's never over, one that has no, end, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? It's very draining in that way. Like it can suck you in, suck you dry, leave you kind of hollow feeling inside because it's sucking everything. It's sucking so much energy out. Even, like I say, to go back to the original question, even experiences like happy experiences can all of a sudden start to get tainted. I think that's what was interesting to me, most interesting to me about the question. Like why even that? Why even when I'm happy does it have to find its way into my life? Like that's the most compelling part to me. I think it totally goes back to one of my favorite conversations we've had right now, and that is the are you enough, or facing the feeling of not enough. It's a core experience, And if you really don't feel like you're enough, you're going to have a lot to worry about. And that's because, to go back to what I started with Brené Brown, the reason she talks about foreboding joy is in reference to vulnerability, David. This is an armor we put on to try to avoid vulnerability. We think if we worry about stuff enough, then we're going to figure it out and we won't be vulnerable to uncertainty, like you said. Do you know what I mean? But the only reason that we're fighting that vulnerability is because we don't feel like we're enough to deal with it. That's my personal understanding, whether it's about myself or with other people, right? It's a deep thing, in other words. It's a really deep issue for human beings.
That's why I said it's an awareness of what you lack control over, or that you're playing a weak hand in a certain way. That's I am not enough, right? And I think one of the reasons why it can turn into quicksand is that you think that if you stop worrying, maybe the worst will come true. Yeah. So that you better keep worrying. Okay, well, I'm not enough for this. I better practice. I better come up with a plan. I better keep worrying, and then because I'm not enough, and then you just keep going. But like we said, it's a bottomless pit. And the more you struggle, the more you find where you're potentially not enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think people go there. I think it so easily turns from joy to worry, or from happiness, I guess, is more what the question was. Why these moments of happiness so quickly go to worry? Because worry is home. That's the natural state.
Right.
Happiness is not the natural state. In that way, like we don't just, happiness is kind of I think of it as this temporary alignment of circumstances and mood and outlook and all these things. And happiness, you almost kind of find yourself in by accident. You almost kind of like wake up to realize that you're happy. And it's almost by surprise, like that kind of happiness. And then as soon as you're surprised, you think, oh my God, I stopped looking for what could go wrong. Right?
Right.
You go home. Because we are natural worrying machines.
Sure, and it's a desire for control, which is just our antidote for uncertainty, right? And you can't control happiness. Or lots of people work hard on it, right? But if you're not somebody who's figured that out at all, or hasn't really figured it out enough, then it's safer, because worrying, you understand. You know how to worry, and you can do that. And so like happiness is like, I'm happy, but I'm not sure I'm in control of this happiness. That's a disconcerting, it doesn't feel like home, as you said, right? And then so I'm going to resort back to this thing that I know I can control. Like I'm going to start worried about this, and it's something I understand, and I can work on that. Makes me feel like I'm,
I want to reiterate what you just said, because that was unexpected but beautiful. I never even thought of it that way, but I really want to. Happiness is something you can't control. Like I just said, it kind of happens to you by surprise. It's like this temporary alignment of things, and you can't control it. And it is the unknown. Happiness is like this grand uncertainty, and and worrying is something you can't control. You can get back to worrying. Here's happiness. I've been looking for this. I don't know how to control it. If I worry, maybe I can hang on to it.
That's it. That's an interesting. Yeah,
that's the wrong conversation right there. If I worry about this, maybe I can hang on to it.
And that's the secret conversation. That's the secret conversation. You know what I mean? The one that you're not paying attention to, but that you're having with yourself. Because I think you just, expressed it very good. But most people aren't paying attention at that level, right? You know what I mean? Because that's the conversation they're having with themselves. It's like, I want to hold on to this happiness, so I better worry so that I can. But then, of course, you've immediately, you're out of happiness immediately the moment you do that, right? You've lost grip.
Well, it's good to just stop and just remind folks to, like, next time that happens, see if you can remember this moment that we're talking about, and watch yourself, tell yourself that the only way I can hang on to this happiness is if I worry about something, and realize how silly a thought like that really is if you really explore it.
Right.
It's universal. We all do it. It's like an impulse.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
sure.
We are very driven to protect whatever we have. If we have this moment of happiness, we're gonna really try to protect it. But we kind of sink it by starting.
You know what I
often
often say about that too, when it comes to, because I already said it sort of, the mind is a problem-solving machine. That's what it's created for. I mean, it's what it does. That's what it's excellent at it too, right? We should be very grateful for it. But it's so good at it, and it's so, like, it's its primary purpose, especially that it understands, that it will even create problems so that it can solve them. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a perfect example of it too, right? You're having a happy moment. Well, there's no problem to solve. Oh, I better create a problem to solve. I better worry about, you know what I mean? Like, that's a way, and it does that on so many levels. This is just worry, but I mean, it does that with all kinds of things, right? That's one of the things that'll fixate on emotions and get lost there, right? And start creating problems. Like, if you're feeling depressed, and if it starts to think, gosh, I'm really feeling depressed. God, I wonder if I'm I wonder if I'm a depressed person. Like, it could start to create, you know what I mean? It really does that, though. The more it focuses there, the more, like you already said that, the more it creates it,
One thing I say to myself if I catch myself worrying, and I think maybe I don't know if I should be worrying so much, is that worrying doesn't mean that something is wrong. It means that you are busy imagining something that could go wrong in your imagination. If you're worrying about something, there might be nothing. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. In fact, it's a good indication that nothing is wrong. Enough, or else you'd be dealing with it, right? You'd be facing it.
That's it. Yeah. Right. Right. No, absolutely. That's very true.
That always helps me. I just know that, like, oh, if I'm sitting here worried about it, that means nothing's gone wrong yet.
Right. That's right. Well, they usually
I have the luxury.
They usually say, and I'm sure Brene Brown says it too. Gratitude is an antidote for worry. Like if you're finding yourself ruminating about worries, to think about something you're grateful for, right? It shifts the energy. That's a typical, and it's a great suggestion. It's a tips and tricks thing though for me. Because if you don't go to the place that I already, elicited, the point of if you don't realize that there's actually a deep sense of I'm not enough, and you don't ever deal with that, no amount of gratitude listing is actually going to get to you. It can help shift the mood for a minute, but then you're going to find yourself worrying again. And that's the other thing too. There certainly has to be some sort of differentiation between worrying and planning, or because there's a certain characteristic to worry, right? It has a negative connotation. I mean, if you're making plans, if you're goal setting, you're not worrying, but it's a similar thing, right? You're looking into the future, you're thinking about what you want and what you don't want, but it's not contextualized in this sense of worry. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, worrying is less about the action and more about the energy around the action.
Yes, beautiful.
You can plan for the future, you can look for potential pitfalls, but if you're doing it without a lot of negative energy around it, then you're just planning,
Right. That's my
The
point.
worry
Exactly.
is like the compulsive emotional circle that's happening in you, right?
Yeah.
Right? So there is a difference. So worry kind of worry kind of falls in between like planning and anxiety. Like anxiety's way on this. We're not talking about anxiety here, right? We're not going that far with it. But we're also not just talking about problem solving ahead of time, making a couple plans for the future to make sure things work out. We're talking about this kind of emotional state of the spinning wheels, in the mind.
I love that you said I always think of that as like feedback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that should resonate with you being a music guy, right? It's like, when it gets to that level, it starts, you know what I mean? It's circling back on itself. That's the problem solving. And then needing to problem solve, like always.
Yeah.
Creating
Self-perpetuating
problems
amplification.
to solve.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that's it.
just-
The energy behind that feels like that,
Yes. I like what you said about I maybe looking toward gratitude. Like gratitude can be a cure for worry. And so I asked myself, okay, well, yes, I believe that's true. Why is that true? And it's just because it shifts focus, right? Gratitude
sure.
is if you when you're worrying, you're focused in on your worry to the exclusion of everything else. Right, so what you're seeing is worry. That's those glasses I talked about having on. That's when worry just starts to become the world around you because everything is colored with that energy. But then if you do turn over and look at something like gratitude, then you're focused on what's going right, what's not going wrong.
That's the point, exactly. I want to reiterate, though, I did not say it was the cure, because I don't believe it is a cure.
It's
but
not a cure,
I think
but
it can help. It can help. Yeah.
It's a step
No,
outside.
it's an important distinction between. Yeah.
Well, is there a cure?
I think there is to a degree. I do.
To a degree.
The feedback.
Yes.
Like
okay.
where it's
okay.
not, where it's, or the snowball, where
Yes,
you're like,
yes.
where you can't experience happiness without worrying. Like that's a certain level, and I think you absolutely can transcend that or shift that, or I do.
Okay, yeah.
And I think
It's not a
gratitude
total
can start
cure
you
for
there, but I
worry.
won't do it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a cure for worry as
Yeah.
a thing, but it is a cure for the amount of worry. You don't remove worry from your life, but you can reduce it. Or you can reduce the amount of time you spend in the hamster wheel. Right?
Yes.
Right. And there are different levels of how to do this. And so I something because we've we're touching on like a couple different levels at once. We're talking about maybe just shifting focus from the worry to gratitude. That's kind of like a opening level shift of
Right.
it's kind of more of a ground level, simple place to start. And then we're also talking about the I am not enough, which is probably the ultimate place to go, right? Like that's
Right. And that's the cure. To go there is the cure lies there, I think, more.
Okay, but
and again, like you said though, not to go ahead.
Well, no, I mean I just want to differentiate those two things, right? One is like a simple place to start. The other one's the deepest cure that you work on over a lifetime, right? They're two different things, yeah. So I think it's good. It's good just to do that and then paint a path in between those two things,
And I think it's important because here's why am I sticking to this point and like making a big deal out of it? Because if you think doing gratitude all the time is going to change that, you will probably be disappointed. And I almost feel bold enough to say you will definitely be disappointed. Why? Because you're going to find yourself worrying again. And then you're going to go back to your gratitude, and then you're going to find yourself worrying again, and you're going to go, and at some point you're going to be like, this gratitude crap just doesn't work. And it's not that doesn't work; it's that it's not the answer. It's just help. It can help get you there, but if that's the only work you're doing, it won't be enough. You know what I mean? And you're going to find yourself, because more than likely, this is an issue for you. Like this person who asks, like if they're at that level of like, why can't I ever experience a moment of happiness without turning into worry? They're probably on the hamster wheel, like you know what I mean? And gratitude will help slow it down or whatever, but it won't get you off the hamster wheel. That's what I feel like,
I think might slow down the hamster wheel. It might get you off for a second, but you're going to be thrown back on. But you do have to get off the hamster wheel to start working on the solution. Like I had this conversation with my wife last night, and I was making the case for something we talk about, or at least I always bring up a lot, orientation and posture, right? In life, have a North Star, and not any North Star, but really, really a well-considered, deep North Star that you are walking toward, that you can lean on or head toward whenever things get confusing and dark, right? So, and that by having that North Star, it can pull you out of all kind of things on the ground. It can help you shift your habits, right? It can help you make better decisions, right? So I was making the case for like, have the North Star and that's the answer. And my wife made the opposite point. If you don't have the habits, you can't even start moving toward the North Star. You can't even see it because your habits are still back in the hamster wheel. And so it was this really interesting discussion because it was which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, So when we're talking about facing the I am not enough is a big philosophical long-term strategy but that is honestly the only answer to really solve the problem, right? In the long run. But you may not ever have time to really sit and consider that unless you are also doing some of the on-the-ground small practices of slowing down the hamster wheel or stepping off it for a minute, which are these smaller habits, which are things like gratitude. The shifting of the focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Go ahead.
No. I just it's really good to just know what we're describing here, right? There's an answer.
Yeah.
It's a big long-term answer, maybe the only true answer. Okay, but now there's these smaller steps on the way there that are of import. They're important value. Yeah.
Well, so we've said gratitude now probably 100 times. So what would be another one that you would have? Do you have another suggestion for helping shift a habit or slow down the hamster wheel or hop off for a second?
Yeah, well, I think that we're talking about shifting focus from the worry to gratitude, and it all comes down to there's one phrase that whenever I'm facing any kind of big subject like this, or whenever or maybe I'm in a coaching session, somebody calls me and they lay out some big, heavy thing, and maybe it's overwhelming. I'm like, where do I start? I have a North Star in coaching or even in my own life. And I don't know who said this. It's not mine, but it's a very simple phrase, which is awareness alone is curative. meaning that awareness can help cure the problem, right? Awareness alone is curative. And so if you're lost in any problem, including your worry, start with awareness. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It means what we started this conversation with, which was, what is worry? How does it work? We talked about that it's not just you that this happens to. You're not broken. You're actually functioning as designed. You are a worrying machine by design. That's a little bit of awareness. That's a little bit of awareness about what worry is and how it works. That helps you, gives you one more thing to see around it. Okay, I'm aware that this is just a thing that happens in all of us, and it has a good purpose. Right? So that's a little bit of awareness. Shifting your awareness from the worry to the gratitude is a awareness change. Oh, there's things I should worry about. Here's things I should be thankful for. That's a growth in awareness. Right? Mm-hmm. So I just think about, asking questions like, what is worry? How does it show up in you? Understanding yourself. Where do I fall on the worrying spectrum? Do I worry more than most people or less than most people? And what does that mean? Does that, how much of this is a me problem, right? So worrying is universal, but we all worry to different degrees. Where do I sit? I have assessments that I recommend people take when I'm working with them that shows them, are you a natural worrier or not? It's just good to know so that you have some context. Whenever you start worrying, you have the awareness that like, oh, I do this. I do this. Awareness can look like knowing what your triggers are. What triggers your worry more than other things? I guarantee you that for everything that you habitually worry about, there are a billion other things that you could worry about that you just don't. Right? Yeah. You're not worried about those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're equally threatening, but you don't. It doesn't matter to you.
You just don't spend any time there. Exactly. Yeah.
So what are your triggers and knowing? And so I follow that because there are certain things that I worry about, but knowing what my triggers are, that whenever I start to worry, I can say, oh, that's my trigger. And my trigger has been triggered. And I'm aware of myself in that way. And that all that does, it doesn't remove your worry, but it starts to help you see around it. And once you see around it and you can contain it a little bit, you have a little more power to work with it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by awareness.
I would say, another great place to put awareness is your body. If you're deep in a session of worrying, right? And this becomes awareness on all these different levels too. Like you have to pay attention. Where do I carry my worry? Most of us do somewhere. I mean, are you like this? Is it your jaw? Is it your stomach gets sick? And then to pull your awareness in there, obviously if it's these tension things, that's a nice thing because you can just relax a little bit, bring some awareness. Now, by the way, you've already shifted your attention away from the worry a little bit because now all of a sudden you're focusing on your body, right? But if your stomach gets sick because you're shifting energy and shifting focus, like you said. But the body's a good one because there's somewhere it lives in your body somewhere, probably many, many places. But, just to say it, because the stomach could be a weird one, like, how do I relax my stomach? You try to breathe into your stomach a little bit, which is interesting. And at first, too, it might feel a little funny, like maybe not even enjoyable. But if you do it for a few minutes, you'll find that it does help relax you in that way. If your heart's racing, breathe into your heart a little bit, giving it that awareness. And it's kind of like a loving attention too, in a weird way, right? Like I could see, I'm stressing you out, heart. You know what I mean? I can see I'm stressing you out. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take a couple deep breaths and breathe into you. You know what I mean? It is useful. It does help. And if no other reason, what you said, which is what made me think of it, is shifting your awareness again. Definitely. In a very real way.
Yeah.
Grounded way.
That's getting in touch with your body not only gives you awareness of what's happening to you, because a lot of times worry will start before you're conscious of it. You're not aware that you're worrying for a while.
Of course.
Until it builds into it kind of happens subtly in the background, and all of a sudden you're in the hamster wheel, and you wake up to it. And your body is a good indicator that something is starting to happen to you, right? That there is some worry in you. And I love that just by asking yourself the question, what is happening in my body? That's taking you're no longer worried about whatever you're worried about. Because you can't think about more than one thing at a time, really.
Right.
So instead of worrying about your worry, focusing on worry, now you're focused on what's happening in my body. That's more of a curious state. That's a big shift.
I agree.
So it's not just about expanding awareness, but directing awareness
Yes.
is a helpful
Beautiful. I love
thing.
that.
Which is gratitude, what's happening in my body, what is worry all about, how does it work, what are my triggers. These are more curious questions to redirect awareness. A word that you use a lot that I really like is exposure. Right? What are you exposing yourself to? And
God.
and the environment
That can
you're
definitely
in.
lead to more worrying for sure, right?
It can, but it also affects your awareness. Like what you're aware of what surrounds you. You're aware of what you're exposed to. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or in a hamster wheel of worry, sometimes you can change your exposure or focus.
Yes.
You can focus on changing what you're exposing yourself to at that moment.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
if
that.
you're worried,
Definitely.
if you're worried about coronavirus, then maybe don't sit there and watch 20 videos on coronavirus for a while.
Right.
Or something like that, right? I mean, I understand you're trying to solve problems and answer questions, but if you're in a hamster wheel, maybe just go take a walk instead.
Right.
I just kind of accidentally stumbled into another strategy for removing worry, but that worry is a state. And your state, like you were commenting on, has a physical component. And you can change your state by changing your physicality, what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Go out and take a walk, you know?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of energy in worrying too, by the way. Not energy as in affirming energy, but busy energy. Like that's why you'll find places in your body where right? So getting some working out, you know, whatever that means to you, right? Whether it's aerobics or weightlifting or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's a good way to diminish some of that energy, to give it a healthy outlet, right? And you'll find too that you will worry less. I mean, exercising does release all kinds of positive biochemistry too, right? That helps with that. It's like a natural antidote too. So, because by the way, there's all kinds of biochemistry happening when you're worrying. Like you talk about that too, like and sometimes you're going to need to let that. You talked about that in something you and I were talking about. I can't remember what it was, but you were saying like, what is it? How long does it take for that to usually like?
If you have like an adrenaline hit or something that really wigs you out, like if a car drives into your lane and there's almost a big accident and you get that super like that bolt of lightning that goes into your body, and then everything's fine a half a second later, and then you say okay. But then you're left with that feeling. That's because that chemical is now in your bloodstream. It's in your muscles. It's in you. It's all through you, and that chemical has to play out and start to wash out of the body, and that takes about 20 minutes.
20
at
minutes,
least.
is that what it is? Yeah.
At least 20 minutes.
And
I
if
think,
you're worrying, it's probably different, a little bit, but it's still there. And it depends on how acute your worrying is, right? I mean, if you're in a real serious session of it,
Yeah, you're a biochemical electricity machine. I mean, these things have a chemical, physical component, right?
They do.
You are a machine that works in a certain way, and part of the way the machine works is when you worry, it worries through some sort of biochemical process, right? So once you're in that wheel, there's a chemical reason why you're in it. So you can help to remove worry by trying to work on the. People will say if you're worrying or if you're in a bad mood, just go get a bite to eat. I'm not talking about like stress eat a tub of ice cream. I'm just saying like go have you can
that works
change
for
your body
me.
chemistry.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Go have a donut. No, but so there's a simple thing that is simple, but it was really meaningful for me in solving challenges when I face them. But I also bring it up with people a lot. Is that just remembering that your thoughts, your feelings, and that your what you're doing, your physicality or your actions are all tied together. They seem like separate things, but it's one system, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking to yourself, I'm out of control, this is all uncertainty, I'm weak here, then you're going to feel scared. You're going to feel worried. But that feeling of worry is going to release all these chemicals and all this stuff. And then what are you going to do? Your body's going to show up. It's going to crunch down. You're going to get agitated. It's going to show up in your body as we're talking about. And all three of those things are tied. And then that feeling is going to lead you to think more worried thoughts. And this is why the hamster wheel starts to spin. Because all three of these things, your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are all working together. So if you want to get out of the state you're in, or if you want to change the energy you're experiencing, I think of these three things as creating your energy. right? This is the energy you're experiencing. There's a thought, a feeling, and a physical component. And that if you want to change, that you find whichever one of those three things you have the most leverage over and start pushing on that leverage, right? Yeah. So it can be a physical thing. Well, I can't just change my feelings and my thoughts. I've been trying to tell myself happy thoughts and it's just not working. Go out for a walk. Do some exercise. Eat something, right? That's a physical, that's you exercising your physical leverage over yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's just, I just try to remember those three things and then finding where you have the most leverage and start applying your leverage. And the rest of those things, the thoughts and the feelings will follow the physical state, or the physical state will follow if you can change the thoughts, and vice versa, because they are all bound together in a kind of web. Yeah.
They are. It's one of the things, you said they're all connected. Everything's connected. That's what's really interesting. If you think about everything we've talked about, I know that sounds like it's a little too obtuse to mean anything, but it means a lot. If you want my opinion, like the exposure is connected, right? Like, in other words, if you're exposing yourself to lots of news about COVID, of course you're going to worry about COVID, right? As an example of how there's connection, right? If this person makes you worry a lot because of the things they talk about all the time, or, it's just silly. I mean, it's all relational. That's part of why that's why I call myself a relational coach, because when I say relational coach, that just means I'm going to help you, or we're going to work together to see how everything is connected, Like, it's such a powerful thing. When you say those three things, those are really beautiful core components, of how we can find ourselves in certain states. But there's so much too, right? And and again, being aware of them and then picking one can do a tremendous amount. The awareness is the first place. And then to say, like you said, I love the way you said that too. Which one do I have some leverage on? You know what I mean? Well, stop watching the video or you know what I mean? Like, I have a little issue with claustrophobia, right? If I'm watching a show I do. That's probably my one fear, if you will. And if I'm watching a show that's making me claustrophobic, I'm going to keep watching it? I just had this happen. That's what made me think of it too, right? And I'm like, man, this is really making me feel like crap. And I'm also aware enough, like, this might even make me dream about it if I'm not careful. And I really don't want to have dreams about claustrophobia. It's my least favorite subject, right? So I'm going to fast forward this part of this movie because I'm not digging it, Like, it was a little too, they're just in this place, the whole thing. Anyways, it's just an example of how everything's connected, though, even that, right? Like, what you're exposing yourself to, being aware of the things some of your weak spots, that's what I just expressed, right? It's a weak spot for me,
You're aware of it.
Exactly.
You're aware of it, and you're aware of a fix, right? The most efficient fix for you is just, well, don't take it in. Don't expose yourself to it, right? Yeah. The value of exposing yourself to it isn't worth the cost. So don't do it.
No, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Worry is kind of there's an energy about worrying. I always hesitate to talk too much in terms of energy because it makes me sound so much like a life coach, but there is no better way to say that. Sometimes exactly. It's like
you have to,
because there's so many components to energy. Like I said, there's a physical, there's a emotional, there's a exposure, there's your of your environment. There's all these things, right? You can. What I mean by that is like you can take on the worrying energy of someone else, or of the movie you're watching. If there's worry in the movie, if there's worry in the news, that worry translates onto you and it can become your worry.
Exactly.
And you have to be really aware. This is why awareness alone is curative. If you're just aware that exchange is happening, now you have more power to stop that exchange.
Exactly.
Because you're aware of it.
My wife is great at this. She will not watch any movies or shows or anything like that has to do with children in danger. Because that's her big thing, right? She has a pretty good one on everything else, but if it's like they're getting abducted or anything like that, you just leave, because it's a weakness for her, right? If that movie, that sends her there like that, and it will linger that's what kind, right? And so she knows if we start watching, she's like, honey, I don't want to watch it. I'm like, okay, that's fine, turn off it goes. It's not worth the price. you know?
That was one of the big things I recognized after having kids, is that those movies mean something very different now, right?
Yeah, right.
Watching anything happen to a child is like, oh my God, I can't. Yeah, that gets under my skin. It gets under my wife's skin. We don't do it,
Yeah.
because it's just such a sensitive place because we have a deep vulnerability there. So we don't expose. So we don't start the hamster wheel going. Yeah.
Right. Because it doesn't lead to anything either, right? I mean, there's nothing you're going to do about, 99.9% of it is not going to happen to you, right? But man, it'll set the wheel going. And why would you do that to yourself? I think that's
So there's one more. So we've talked about a lot, and a lot of really good practical things. We've even gone to the deep thing of the you are not enough. But there is a sort of, I don't want to call it a tool, but it's like an exercise or an outlook I do use a lot with people that seems to help. And I've said this in previous conversations we've had here, but is to make this negative emotion or this thing that you don't want, realize that it's your friend, right? And that it has good intentions.
Exactly.
And this ties right back into the beginning of the video. Worrying is a natural thing to do. Why? Because maybe it helps us solve a problem ahead of time. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to protect you. Right. It's trying to protect your family. It's trying to do all these things. Right?
Exactly.
But do you let all of your friends run your life? Probably not, or probably you shouldn't if you do, right? So,
right.
So when I say make it your friend, like I get really, I take this pretty far. I'll invite people to give it a name. The side of you, the voice in your head that's worrying all the time, I'll say give that voice a name. And people will come up with the funniest names. But if they don't come up with like a personal name, you can call it your gremlin or your negative self-talk or the devil on your shoulder, whatever metaphor. You can use all these different things, but I'll have people like literally give it a name. So, that's my nagging Nancy, or that's my worried Wilhelmina or something. I don't know, whatever. I'm just making up really random stuff. Right. But I'll have them give it a name so that suddenly there's one level of separation between them and that feeling.
Yes.
Which is very helpful. Yeah. I am not my thoughts and emotions, like you say, right? That's step number one. I am not worry. Worrying is a thing that happens to me or passes through me, right? So if you name it, it separates you. And then remember that it's your friend and you acknowledge what it's trying to do. Thank you for giving. So your friend, your naggy friend gives you some naggy advice, okay? Thank you for giving me this advice. You're trying to help me.
Right.
You're trying to help me. So you acknowledge that it is a helpful voice, and then thank it. Thank you. Thank you for warning me about this potential danger. And by doing that, you are telling yourself, the voice in yourself that is worrying, I have heard you. I've acknowledged what you've had to say, and I'm thanking you for your service. Thank you for your service, right?
Yeah.
But then you decide. No, thank you. I don't need that. That's not the most important thing I need to worry about right now. Or like you set a boundary with your friend. You're gonna let your friend say what they have to say. You're gonna let them nag you, but you're not gonna necessarily let them run your life. You don't have to take their advice, right? You can decide where you're gonna set your boundary between you and your friend. Just like you can decide where you're gonna set your boundary between you and that worry. And just understanding that there is a separation between those two things. So I really like to personalize worry as a person. Like I like to personify it.
Right.
Yeah.
You can decide when you realize it's not you. Otherwise, you're caught in it.
Yeah.
You can decide to say, that's my, here's my boundary with worry, only when you realize that you are not worry. Because when you're caught up in it and you're completely identified with it, there's no room for that, right? Again, this comes back to awareness. David, I think that was probably the most practical suggestions and advice of the whole thing so far, if you want my opinion. And it sounds like, to me, it's almost like step one, or awareness is always step one, right? But then that might be step two. Then you could move to, okay, I've heard you. I think I'm gonna think about something I'm grateful for. You know what I mean? Like, I've
Yeah.
heard you, and now let's move on. I'm going to choose a different voice here. I'm going to choose a different side of myself. I'm going to look at something. And then what I would say, and this is because you wanted to wrap that up with wrap up your thing with that. I would like to wrap up my "you are not enoughness," which you've already hinted to, which is cool, with the fact of acknowledging this is what's missed 90% of the time with all things like this. It doesn't matter what it is, right? That who is choosing? Who has any ability to be aware at all? And who says, oh, this is nagging Nancy? And then who says, oh, I'll be grateful? This is the part of you that is enough. And if you acknowledge, if you realize the fact that that there's a deeper part of you, there is awareness or consciousness at a deep level, right? You start to pay attention to that. Like, how do you even have a choice at all? You know what I mean? Like, because you are not these emotions. And when you start to realize that you actually can start to pick and choose them a little bit, that you can become aware of them, there's something deeper going on if you pay attention at that level. And if you pay attention at that level, you'll start to notice that you are enough. You are enough. You can get through it.
I think a way to sum that up is you are not your worry. You are not your thoughts and emotions. You are awareness.
Right.
You are the awareness of these things. Right is a more accurate. I don't even know if that's totally accurate, but I think it's you are the thing to which worry occurs, right? You are the thing watching the worry or experiencing the worry. And just remembering that there's a separation and that the awareness, like the worry is the part of you that makes you think I am not enough. But with the this is a really hard thing to put into words, and I'm going to fail, and maybe you can help because this is the point you brought up. But I'm wondering where is you said something that is profound that I think is true, but I have trouble building a bridge between where I'm at and where that is. How is that part of you enough? How do you know? How do you start to know?
I'll help you. I'll help you with this. Here it is. Here's the breadcrumbs, okay? It's very real, and it's something we've already talked about. Where does worry get its energy? If you look for the energy in worry, you won't find it. Worry doesn't have any energy. You have energy. Your awareness, that's why wherever you put your focus, all of a sudden the energy shifts. Do you see it? So, and that's the thing that I'm trying to get you. So that's why if you focus on gratitude, all of a sudden you'll start feeling more grateful. Not 100% because there's some trailing energy that worry kicked up, right, in a way. Or you're focusing on worry kicked up. But if you look for the energy in worry, you won't find it. Yeah. It's because it doesn't have any of its own. You are the energy.
You are the energy, yes. Yeah. And that's pretty
profound. Does that help?
You are the energy, and you are the director of it. Yeah.
That's why I say, actually do it. Look for the energy in worry. Look. And you'll find thoughts, you'll find emotions, but if you look a little deeper, like, where is this energy coming from? Where is all this energy that I'm feeling behind my worry? Where is it coming from? It's a Wizard of Oz thing, man. Pull back, and you'll see the big fiery guy there, right? It's just this little old man. He's not. It's you. It's not what you think it is. And I know this from experience. I mean, from my own personal experience. And I know that whenever I can actually help somebody, that's what ends up happening in a way. They see that they're the director of the energy. You've already said this. I'm just trying to put another dimension to it, like what's actually,
No, I appreciate it. Yeah,
it's an interesting. It's one of those things that gets missed. That's the thing, too. That's why gratitude won't work on its own, David, because you're missing this incredibly important point. Do you know what I mean? Because you're putting the emphasis on gratitude. The emphasis isn't gratitude. That's just a little tool. That's just a little trick, as we said. Like
it's a change in focus. Yeah. It's on the ground. It's a practical thing. Yeah. It gets you started, but it doesn't get you there.
That's all I have to say about that. I'm gonna have a chocolate now. No.
Well, it is a deep thing, and I think it's one of those things that you can't, like, there is no pithy quote or statement that you can just say that makes people go like, oh, oh, my enoughness is now completely obvious to me because I watched this video of David and Adrien speaking about it.
Right.
Right. It is an experience that you have to search for and find, but I think what's important to mention to people, because maybe that doesn't sound like a practical, helpful solution, but if you go searching for it, it does help. It starts to build the case. It starts to make you more aware of that, and that is the big solving of the problem of worry. A lot of stuff's going to happen on the ground. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff you're not going to be enough for. There's a lot of problems that are unknown that you won't be ready to solve. There are things that will happen that are out of your control, right? Yeah. And that everything is going to change, and you don't have a lot of power over those things. And so the worry is endless. And the worry is partly always true and correct. One thing I'll say about the moment of, there's a moment of happiness, and here comes the moment of worry that just invariably follows, is that your worry is correct. The happiness will end. It's going to end. Something will happen. True. In fact, something bad might even happen. And your worrying about it is probably not going to change it. And to remember that it's coming on because it's home. It's your natural place to be. Worry is home. Happiness is not. And when you find a moment of happiness, remind yourself that worrying about it is only going to take away the happiness, and maybe just, it's okay to accept the gift of that happiness for a moment.
Yeah. That's an important thing. It is a gift. Yeah.
Just accept the gift, It's very hard to accept compliments because you're aware of all the ways that compliment may not be accurate. Right. But what do you want? When you give somebody a compliment, do you want them to turn it down? No, you want them to accept it. And if the universe gives you a moment of happiness, maybe it would like you to have it. So maybe accept the gift. There will be plenty of time to worry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe accept the gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think, when we say worry is home, I think there's a few questions I think that come up with people. Like, they're worried what's going to happen if they don't worry. Like, if I don't worry, something's going to go wrong that I could have solved, right? And then if I stop worrying and something goes wrong, is it my fault? I think that really hits people. And then there's, what else do I do if I don't worry? We mentioned this, I think, in the I Am Not Enough video, where I mentioned that bumper sticker, Jesus is coming, look busy.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Meaning, judgment is coming. You better look busy, because if you're not busy worrying and something bad does happen, maybe it's your fault, and you don't want to live with that guilt.
Right.
And, but man, how much is really your fault, and how much can you head all that off at the pass before it comes?
Yeah.
And how much do you ruin your ability to deal with what's actually happening by distracting yourself with what might happen? These are all really kind of questions
happiness.
To ask. Yeah.
Sure. All happiness or joy, whichever word you want to choose, comes with an element of vulnerability. You're not going to remove it. And if you do remove it, you're going to remove the joy or happiness. So what you need to realize is that you are enough. That if something bad happens and you even feel guilty about it, you're going to get through it. You're going to be able to do this, right? If something bad happens, you can deal with it. You will deal with it. Well, how do you know? Because you have. You've had plenty of things happen in your life already, right, David? Right? This is your life. Your being here right now is proof that you can deal with it. We just don't, when we're worrying, we're not focused there, right? We're not focused on the fact of how many things that we've actually saw ourselves through successfully. And the list is really, really long. You know what I mean? You've done a great job to get where you are. And it's not
even
about
when we
perfect.
failed.
You know,
even when we failed,
exactly.
even when our worrying
maybe
failed.
especially when we failed, those are the moments that, because we got back up somehow, because here we are. Patrick, that's good. You can do it. That's the only point. You are enough. That's the thing that's important to, but we don't, that's not what we're thinking or feeling, But if you can get in touch with, think about that too. Turn your focus on some time where you've worried about this thing and you've got yourself out of it, or, like, you can do it. You are enough. And, again, too, it's like whatever happens, you can deal with it. Feeling that is how you can actually experience happiness. Meaning that whatever the happiness is going to end, as you said, right? So knowing that, and that you're going to be fine after that. And if something bad does happen, you're going to be fine. You're going to work it out. You're going to figure it out, right? I mean, you are enough to do it. That's the point, right? I mean, to me,
I always think that worrying is becoming acutely aware of everything you lack control over. And that part of stopping worrying isn't gaining control over all these things. Isn't worrying so you come up with answers to gain control. It is literally accepting and becoming comfortable that you do lack that control.
Exactly.
Right?
No, exactly.
And knowing that the happiness is built to end. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the lie of worrying. That it's going to solve it. Do you know what I mean? But it never does. Not the big thing. I mean, because there's always something more. So... You know what I mean? That's the falseness. It has a sense that it's going to cure something, but it never can in that way. Not in worrying. We can plan. We can, like you already distinguished. That's a really important distinction. But you know what I mean? I think that's important to. Again, that's awareness too, right?
I think those are. That's where I start with worry. Worry is a deep.
That's a lot.
It's a deep and timeless thing, and I think that this subject will warrant a lot of conversations in the future, and maybe this was a big picture look at worry, but folks out there, feel free if you have a specific worry question that maybe you're wondering how we would answer it specifically, or maybe wondering how what we already said would apply to that. Please throw it in the comments because we're happy to zero in on very specific things and maybe attach some of these bigger ideas to your specific questions and stuff. Yep. Yeah.
No, leave a comment. And while you're there, like the video. That would be
and subscribe to the channel.
Maybe consider subscribing. Yeah, you never know. You might be inspired to do that. Who knows? I mean,
please, so we don't have to worry all night about whether we're enough on this.
Yes, exactly.
With our humble little show, you can help us. You can help us worry a little less. That it's all for naught.
Exactly. We didn't talk about what's the next thing.
That's okay.
We didn't.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Our next talk will be about something really interesting that you're really going to want to check out, and there will be a link to it on the screen, on the link screen after we're finished with this conversation. And you should just click that button, and it's going to take you somewhere amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it.
All right.
Well, until next time, David.
Yeah. Great talking to you.
Look forward. Always.